Hello and welcome to Speaking Spirit, where we talk about all things spiritual. Your host, John Moore, is a shamanic practitioner and spiritual teacher. And now, here's John.
Hello, everybody. I wish you good morning, though I don't know what time of day it is. I apologize. My voice sounds a little scratchy this morning. I am just getting over a little cold. Nothing too serious. Not to worry. But there has been a cold that has hit everyone. Everyone I know. It is not COVID, fortunately. And I've only had it for a couple of days. And I feel much better now that my voice is getting worse. I'm going to be sipping some hot beverage. Well, I normally sip hot beverage while I do this anyway. Yeah. So, I apologize for my voice. Although it does sound deeper, I can do this, deeper voice thing. Because my voice is a little scratchy. It's totally fine. I'm good. But as I talk to you this morning, we are well into fall now. We're almost to October as I'm recording this, and it's dark when I get up in the morning. It's one of the things about fall and winter here in the northern part of the U.S. The sun comes up later and it sets earlier, and that'll happen until winter solstice in January. Some people get seasonal affective disorder, right? They get sort of seasonal depression, and I understand that. Sunlight really affects us significantly. It affects, our body chemistry and our the way our brain works and our hormones and all kinds of stuff. Just vitamin D alone from the sunlight on your skin, in this part of the world, they basically say that everybody should be taking vitamin D between October and April every year. So anyway, today I'm going to talk, hopefully this will be a little bit of fun but useful information. And I'm going to talk about divination. And divination's a sort of a fun topic, I think. I hope. But, divination is so widely practiced all over the world. All kinds of cultures have different ways of doing divination. And some are super common all over the world. And so I'm going to talk about that. And then I'm going to talk about, can you see the future? But let's talk about divination a little bit. What does divination mean? Well, it comes from, the Latin words for to foresee, to foretell, to predict. So it does sort of imply seeing the future. Or it's related to the word divinity, to be inspired by God, to get insight into a question, right? And there have been throughout time, there have been rituals for divinations, appeasements to gods, and these things are obviously called by different names in different languages and different cultures. Some of you might think of divination. A really, really common one, at least around here, is reading tarot cards, right? Cartomancy. There are different, lots of people read different kinds of cards, but tarot cards are incredibly popular, and I do a little work with tarot. But I also read another deck, which is a little less popular, called the Lenormand deck. It's from the 18th century. Comes out of Germany and France, and it was like the tarot and regular playing cards came from a game. They were used to play games, and then somebody picked them up and started to use them to do divination, to predict things and to give people insight into questions. So, and I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about the tools of divination and some of the different kinds of divination that are out there. And I'm going to talk about my take on how it works and how predicting the future works, and why, if we can divine things, can we win the lottery, for example? Can we get the numbers from the lottery? Why not, right? If we can predict the future. So I'm going to talk about my take on all of this. You may have a different take, and that's totally fine. But this has come from experience, and my background in divination comes through shamanism. And I don't do divinatory work kind of on its own, right? People don't come to me for psychic readings or any of that sort of thing. But what I do is I work with people from a healing perspective, and I always do journey work in the beginning to gain insight into whatever problem they've come to me with, or questions that they have, or what healing work should be done and what their part is in that sort of thing. So from that, and that's a form, it's a form of divination. It just happens to be in shamanic journey. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that as well. I'm going to talk about why that matters. And maybe I'll give you a couple of stories. I don't like to come off as bragging about stuff. But I do want to share a couple of stories of doing divination work for people where, something was uncannily spot on, as an example. And, when I do that, I'm not taking credit for the work. So I hope that comes through. When I get information, I always get it through helping spirits. I am not doing the work. I'm just sort of translating it. I'm receiving the message and passing it on. So it's not my information. So I hope it doesn't come across as a brag, but I want to give a couple of examples. I will say that when I started in shamanism, I started studying shamanism, however many years ago that was now, and I was going through an apprenticeship with my teacher, and it was not something I wanted to do. I don't want to do divination work. And I think what held me back at that time was that I was afraid of being wrong. And if I were wrong, it would tell me that I didn't know what I was doing, or that what I was doing was fake, or, that sort of thing. And I also didn't want to give really generic stuff, right? Because you can, there's this thing with people who are fake psychics or fake readers or whatever, and they'll say, there's somebody in your life whose first name starts with the letter J. And, of course, everybody knows a Jason, John, Jennifer, or, whatever in whatever is common in your area. Oh, yes, I do know a person in my life with the letter J. Oh, I don't want to do that either. But, I surrendered to it, and it turned out to be something I was fairly good at, and not, I don't put any of the skill. There's not a skill. The skill for me is to get out of the way and not try to think I know more or interpret the information that comes in. So when I see information in Journey for a client, I just relate it, and it doesn't necessarily always mean something to me. I don't know, I see. I'll give you an example. And with one client, I was, this person, lived in an area of the world that doesn't have a lot of turtles, right? And I was like, I keep seeing this turtle, like almost like swimming around, and I don't know if that means anything to you. Well, my grandmother, who passed away a few years ago, collected turtles, and she even had turtles, which is weird in this part of the world. And, there was a connection for her there, and it didn't mean anything to me. So I was able to, sort of get out of the way and just relay the information, and she could do with it what, she could take the information and use it in whatever way made sense for her. So, with divination, the person who's providing the information, no matter where it comes from, that is really the key. And so there are all kinds of different tools of divination. So this morning, just out of curiosity, before I started recording this podcast, I looked up the Wikipedia page for methods of divination. And if you want to, you can do the same thing. And it is fascinatingly huge. So there's all of these different words that relate to different types of divination. A lot of them end with the word mancy. Like avomancy is, like the using birds, the movement of birds as a form of divination. Bibliomancy or chartomancy is, using books. Usually you would turn to, grab a book off a shelf, turn to a random page and point, and then read whatever was under your finger as a way to answer a question. But there's tons and tons, probably hundreds and hundreds of different forms of divination, from throwing bones, throwing dice. There's also, augury or seeing, when you see people look into a crystal ball or look into fire, or there's stories of people using, like looking at their thumbnail, some sort of reflective surface to see things. So I find it interesting that this is so common, and forms of divination, there are sort of forms of divination that show up over and over again, like reading the entrails of animals. Sorry for that, bit of disgustingness, but reading the entrails of animals is pretty common in lots of cultures, whether the animals were hunted or ritually sacrificed or killed for food. That seems to be, super common. Throwing bones or lots, or, some kind of thing where you throw things on the ground and see where they land. I know there are cultures where they throw cowrie shells, little seashells, out and read those. So there's all kinds of methods and, tools for divination. There are a few that I like besides doing journeying. I do like cartomancy. And my current preferred deck is Lenormand deck, as I said earlier. And I like it because I can get, I can pull 9 cards and get a huge amount of information from it, and very specific, and really hone in on the information. I like tarot as well, and I like some of the traditional decks, like the Rider-Waite tarot deck, because there is lots of alchemical symbolism and astrological symbolism and all kinds of stuff in there. So I like that stuff, and there's a lot of depth in tarot, where Lenormand is very simple. The symbols are very simple, but the combinations and the positions that the cards come up in are, lend a lot of nuance to the meaning. So regardless, it shouldn't be a surprise that the reader or the person doing the divination is really the important factor here, right? So, anybody can get deck of tarot cards and a book on what the cards mean and throw out a spread. But really good readers, seers, what have you, are using the cards as sort of a springboard for their intuition. And I would say that's true for most forms of divination. Divinatory work using outside tools, whether that be throwing bones or rocks or, whatever. There are some simpler systems where it's very technical. There's a form of throwing these discs of coconut shells, and the way they land gives you yes or no answers. Or throwing coins for I Ching reading, for example, would give you very specific technical answers to things. But I still think interpreting that stuff falls into the realm of intuition, and somebody who's going to be really good at any of those things is going to come through intuitively. So let's talk a little bit about what I think is going on when somebody shuffles a deck of tarot cards or throws bones or that sort of thing. So I think the way that it works is that there's a certain amount of chaos and randomness. And if I'm holding a deck of cards, and I shuffle it, I am not a machine that's doing, that is, going to shuffle the same way every single time. There is amount of chaos entered, physical chaos entered into the system. And if I, have an intention about the question I'm asking or the person I'm reading for or that sort of thing, we'll say that my system of chaos, my body, can interact with these cards so that they will come up in a certain order. And I think that is true for lots of sort of lot casting ways of divination, throwing bones, throwing coins, rocks, that sort of thing. So we're looking at systems of chaos where there can be all kinds of different answers, and so then the cards, then I pull the cards or you throw the lots or whatever, and then that's where the interpretation starts, right? And a good reading, if I was working with a person and working with a deck of cards, I would have the person cut the deck of cards. And the reason is I'm using their intuition to know where to cut the cards so that the reading is tailored to them. And so there's intuition working there as well. There's intuition telling me how many times to shuffle, and I feel there's a point at which I feel, okay, that's enough. The deck is the way it's supposed to be. And then, the person I'm reading for would use their intuition to decide where to cut the deck. And then this is where the work kind of begins. It would lay the cards out, and there are, specific meanings to the cards, but, I would tailor them using my intuition to the person that I'm reading, the questions that are coming up, the situation, gather more information. And that way I would be able to, slip into the space where my intuition is coming through. Now, I do, here in my home state of Maine, I have a spot on the radio once a week where listeners call in and have me interpret their dreams. I do, that is oniromancy, which is divination by dreams. And some of that is divinatory, where I'm like, okay, this is, this means this for you. But very frequently people just want like the meaning. Why am I dreaming this or that? And, I could be one of those people who looks in a dream dictionary and decides what a dream means based on, XYZ. You dreamed of a baby. That means you are, I don't know. I don't even know because I don't own a dream dictionary. But whatever, you've seen them. There are books that say this is what this dream means. All of it is hogwash. Because everybody's dream system of symbols is completely different. There are commonalities, right? There are commonalities, a few commonalities. There are some symbols that are somewhat universal. Very frequently, for example, water is symbolic of sort of the unconscious parts of ourselves, but not always. And so there is a tremendous amount of context. And when I interact with these people, I'm on the phone, they're on the phone. There is a point at which I get just intuitive information from helping spirits to interpret their dream. And, there was one last week where, a woman kept getting, in her dream, which was recurring, people kept handing her other people's babies and she was dropping them and this and that. And, I got a very clear message that this was about her shouldering too much responsibility, taking things on that were not necessarily her responsibility, or taking too much responsibility for what was going on. And she admitted that she was a small business owner, and she was kind of a perfectionist where everything had to be run her way. And so she wound up doing everything, and her life was kind of crazy. And then I also said, I get the feeling that you're worried about either gossip or what people are thinking about you. And she's like, oh my gosh, I am so worried. Now, only the smallest part of that came from the dream symbolism. The larger part of that came intuitively. And, it would have been, I might have been able to get more, these segments are like 5 minutes long. So I don't get a tremendous amount of time to spend with the person who's calling in. But if I were sitting across from the person, I would be looking at their body language and getting information that way. And that's not cheating. That's not cheating. It's taking in all of the information that I have, which includes intuitive information that I haven't gathered from physical senses, but also the information that I've gathered from physical senses, right? Because, if she just called in and they said, okay, she had a dream, what does it mean? And I didn't have any of the information, I most likely wouldn't have been able to get anything without going into Journey. I could potentially Journey and get some information from her, but I do like it. It's very helpful for me to combine what I know with information that's coming to me from spirit. And I think that's true in all divination. And I don't think it's cheating. It's not. It's not cheating. Anything that gives you better information. If you're just reading somebody's physical body and not providing intuitive information, that would be not divination. It would be something else. And maybe it's fine in a certain context, right? So, for example, therapists, I was talking to someone I know who is a therapist, and I don't have a background in therapy. I haven't been trained in it, but they are trained, or they know both when somebody is lying to them, right? They can tell when somebody's lying to them by reading body language and voice cues and that sort of thing. And they can tell, like, if somebody's hiding, has hidden anger, or like there are feelings that they're not talking about. And some of that might be intuitive, But there is, there is training, there is experience that comes along with that. There is reading body language, and they're able to do that because of the work that they do with people that are, that is not the way that we normally interact one-on-one with people. And they interact in a different way, and it gives them inside information, and they use that to provide better therapy to their clients. To see when somebody's being untruthful about something and try to figure out why that is, maybe, or if somebody's hiding anger or some other feelings, why are they hiding that? Why are they suppressing that? What's going on there? What's the problem there? So at least therapists who are good, who are really good, do that. Which is why I realized, nowadays, particularly with COVID, there's a lot of remote therapy, and I think that's fine over video. I don't know. I mean, there are services out there where you can get just text-based therapy where you're texting back and forth, and I don't know how. Maybe it's useful. Maybe it's useful to some people. I don't know how that is, but you're missing some big components there. So divination, and let's talk about predicting the future a little bit. And again, I'm going to tell a couple personal stories, and this is not. I hope you don't take it as a brag. I'm not trying to brag and say, "Hey, look at me! I'm this big psychic. I'm not." And I'm not particularly psychic. I don't, when I'm in a space and I'm doing work with somebody, I do get intuitive information. But most of my information comes from journeying, and it all comes from somebody. It all comes from helping spirits that I work with. None of it comes from me. I'm not generating the information. And so I give all credit to helping spirits. But I do want to talk, I'll talk about how I think predicting things in the future works. And if we can predict things in the future, why can't we avoid things like terrorist attacks? Or why can't we avoid school shootings? Or why can't we win the lottery? That's a great example, winning the lottery. So this was a few years ago. I was working with a client who was living in a different country. I work with people all over the world. And she contacted me and said that she was having problems with the place she was living. She was living in an apartment in the city where she lived, and there was, I believe there was a rodent problem in the apartment, and there was a mold problem, and so she had to move out for health reasons, and one understands that it was causing health issues for her, and so she wanted some information. If I could gather information about where she might look for places to live, or where she was going to wind up, or that sort of thing. So I said, well, I don't know. I will do my best. I will try to see what I can see. And I, haven't tried to predict the future a whole lot. But I'll look into it. So I journeyed for her, and I kept seeing a red farmhouse out in the country. And so I talked to her after the journey, and I said, I see a red farmhouse in the country. And she said, well, I don't know. I don't know what that means. I live in the city. So, that not really helpful. I said, well, I'm sorry. I just give you the information that I get, and I don't know what it means, and it might be metaphoric. There might be an apartment with a picture of a red farmhouse in the country. I don't know. I don't know. But just take that information in, and, something will come up that's related to that. I'm pretty sure that something will come up that's related to that will give you an indication of where you're supposed to be. And so, I don't know, about 3 months later or so, I get an email from this woman, and she said, I want you to look at, I'm living in my new house, and I want you to look at the view out my living room window. And she sent me a photo, and out her living room window was a red farmhouse out in the country. She had moved out of the city. She had found a house to rent that looked out over a red farmhouse. And it, and I will tell you that it was exactly as I had seen it in my journey. And so this was, for me, like a real hit, obviously, like a really accurate information. So we call that a hit, right? But again, the information didn't come from me, and I didn't know what to make of it. And the person at the time was like, I live in the city. I don't know. And I'm, so my reaction to that is, well, I'm telling you what I saw, and you can, believe it, disbelieve it, take it in, but this is just what I saw, and I'm not going to change, I'm not going to, if I changed, no, now that I think about it, I saw an apartment 2 blocks away. That would be not, that would be not honest, and I'm not going to do that. I do have very strong ethics about the work that I do. And so when I journey, I always tell people, when I tell people what I see, there are exceptions where I hold things back from people when I feel like it's going to be harmful. But other than that, I tell people exactly what I see, and they can make whatever meaning out of that they want to make. I don't interpret. It's not my job to interpret. It's just to provide information. Although, in some divination work, if I'm working with cards, there's a level of interpreting the cards, but even then, the person has to take the information in and figure out how that applies to their life. So, what's going on with predicting the future? And this is my take on how things work time-wise. So first of all, we experience time in a very consistent way. Movement, we only move forward through time, and we, in time travel, goes at the same pace constantly, like a minute is a minute, although it certainly can feel like much longer than that if you're waiting in line or something along those lines. Or it can go much faster if you're doing something you enjoy. Time flies when you're having fun, the old expression. So, our experience of time can be very relative. If we're talking about measurement and scientific instruments, even just clocks, it's very consistent. A second is a second, a minute is a minute, and it only moves forward and that sort of thing. So we don't generally jump forward in time and jump back and that sort of thing. On a physical level, time and space are very, very much linked to matter, to mass. And, E equals mc squared, right? Energy and matter are interchangeable, and, time works differently in space than it does on Earth because of the mass of the Earth and gravitational time dilation. And, I won't go down the physics rabbit hole, but time is very much linked to matter, to material things, to mass, time and space. And so spirit does not have any mass in this world, in the middle world. And so spirit is sort of outside of time. I remember one time it had been, I'd finished training in my apprenticeship, my shamanic apprenticeship with my teacher, and then I went out. She was teaching, this is about a year or a year and a half later, she was teaching a soul retrieval seminar at a big retreat center, and I had gone out, I had signed up for that and gone out there. And I met up with her. I saw her there, and she came up and she gave me a big hug, and I said, it's been a really long time. And she goes, time doesn't exist, and walked off. Just kind of left me with that. So in the realm of spirit, time is a little loosey-goosey. It's a little more flexible. It's a little, it's a little more timeless. This is where prophecy and things like that come from. But that leaves us with a bit of a conundrum, right? It leaves us with the idea that we have free will, and how can we have free will if the things of the future are already determined? And the answer to that is, I don't really think they are. I think when I get information about the future, it is probabilistic, meaning there is probability, not certainty. And I think there are many, many different timelines, and we exist on, many, many different dimensions, and we have parallel lives, and every time we make choices, there's a split off from the timeline. And so what people who are looking into the future are looking at are probabilities. If I continue down this path, what is the most probable outcome, right? If things stay the same, if things stay the way they are, what is likely to happen? And, you can hone in on that a little bit, right? You can hone in on that. Like, if I continue to eat pizza 3 meals a day, I will get heart disease in, the next 5 years. That's probably a really good prediction based on the way things are going right now. But people who can, travel in spirit or, do predictive work or are intuitive are tapping into the spiritual realms, which are, following the probable timeline to bring back more accurate information. If you remember the play Julius Caesar, written by Shakespeare, beware the Ides of March, right? Something bad is going to happen on the Ides of March. And, being warned of this, Caesar still goes to the Senate and gets stabbed by everybody and dies. So the idea is that we still have choices. You still can change your future. If you get some divinatory work done that says, you are going to meet the love of your life at your current job, and tomorrow you go quit your job, well, you are going to intercede with that probable timeline. And so you can change the future outcomes. So why then, if we can look at, these probable outcomes, probable futures, why can't people just, people who are psychic, why can't they just win the lottery every single time? Well, I don't know that hasn't happened, but, when you think about the lottery as a system of chaos, right? You take a big lottery, like we have a lottery called Powerball here in the U.S., and the odds of winning that are something like 1 in 200 and something million. That is a huge, probability to try to predict a huge set of things. And the way that Powerball is chosen is, they have a hopper full of ping pong balls with numbers on them, and those balls get pulled in. So there's this they're stirred up, and so there's a whole lot of physical chaos that's introduced to the system that makes it very hard to predict. You're predicting something with the accuracy of 1 in 200 million. If you could do that, that would be pretty amazing. To follow, the probability, each timeline, the way that the balls are sitting in the machine now, and the machines are moved out, and they jostle along, and there's airflow and all kinds of things that go on. Chaos, right? Chaos. So systems with a tremendous amount of chaos are really hard to predict. Look at the weather. Now, technology is making weather prediction better, more accurate, but it's still not 100%. It's still not on all the time. Because the weather patterns, even though they can be very huge, and you can say, okay, well, we think this hurricane is going to travel here, but it might turn here, and da-da-da, because there's too much chaos in a system like that to be 100% accurate with it. Everything is probable. And frequently hurricanes do things, or large storms do things that that are not predicted, and that can cause significant problems. So weather is a thing, that can be very difficult because of the amount of chaos in the system. There are things with, there are things with less chaos, right? There are, like, I'm looking for a job, or I'm looking for a new place to live. Well, there are only so many places that I could look. And even though, in my example, it was very improbable that, this person was going to be looking in the country, somehow that was on her timeline, that she was going to move out of the city. And that was a probability. And the way I think the information came to me is my helping spirit said, this is the most probable outcome based on a bunch of factors that I could have no idea about. And I realized, like, I'm trying to break divination down into, a really scientific way, but this is how I'm fairly scientific in the way that I think about things, even though I am, a spiritual person and believe there are, that worlds exist that scientific instruments cannot measure at this point in time. And spirit is real, and there are limits to what we can measure and understand with current science. So this is where I think divination can flourish, and this is where people, the person who is providing the information can, as they get better and better. What we know is there are certain brainwave patterns that make people better at doing divinatory work or even doing shamanic journey. So when I do a shamanic journey, it's basically like an active meditation. I close my eyes. In spirit, I go on a journey, but I use rhythm, like drumming or a rattle or, a soundtrack with drums and rattles, normally how I journey. And that's common all over the world, using different types of rhythm. And what we discovered when we invented, electronic brain scanning and, brain monitoring equipment like EEGs, it is that people who were journeying and who were good at it and were bringing back good information, as well as people who were getting hits, reading tarot cards or doing psychic reading, were generating what we call theta brainwaves, which are, I believe, 4 to 8 cycles per second. So these waves, they go up and down 4 to 8 times a second, relatively slow compared to our normal waking state, and even slower than when we're daydreaming or just falling asleep. So it's a little paradoxical because you're wide awake, but your brain waves have slowed down, but the amplitude becomes higher. right? Which means the height of the waves, the power of the waves becomes higher. And for whatever reason, this brainwave state makes us more intuitive. It makes us more in touch, more in tune. And knowing that now is interesting, because we can, if I put together a drum, like a recorded drum track, for example, I can do it at exactly the right timing to drive the exact brain waves that I want to. So in fact, I do. There are, if you go to my website, there are shamanic drumming tracks available there for free. You can listen to those, and if you, I would say don't try to journey on your own. Please seek out responsible instruction on that, because there are ins and outs to that. But you can find those and listen to those on my website. They're freely available under resources, and but those are tuned to the exact rhythm of the brainwave state that we want to use for journeying. But people who are very good at divination, psychic reading or tarot cards or reading bones or whatever, generate these rhythms naturally on their own, or as many as we have tested with EEG equipment. I would definitely like to see more of that. I would like to see more crossover with sort of science and spirit. I think I think those things don't have to live in different worlds and deny one another. I think there's this bogus idea that if you are a scientist, you have to be a material realist atheist or something. And that's not true. I know lots of people who are scientists or in scientific fields who are spiritual. But those things live very frequently in separate worlds. There was a very recent, somebody wrote a thesis on, they did some quantum physics testing to do with shamanism. I'll have to dig it up. It's very, very interesting stuff. They were using quantum EEGs, and I don't exactly know how that works, to see what was going on with shamanic healers and with the clients that they were working with. And, lots of interesting results there. One thing is that their brainwaves would synchronize. So when the shamanic healer was working with the client, their brainwaves started to go in sync. And that's a pretty interesting phenomenon. But there's a lot of really cool stuff there. And I do like that intersection of science and spirit. And I understand that there are things that I experience empirically that cannot be measured or understood by science at this point in time. And that's fine. That's fine. But, I do have a scientific mind, and I try to look at things like, how does divination work? How do we predict the future but not be able to grab lottery numbers? And, I will journey about it. I'll ask my helping spirits, why can't you give me the lottery numbers? Well, because you're not meant to win the lottery, and there's too much chaos in the system. We can give you some probabilities, but it's 1 in 200 million. And you're more likely to get hit by lightning 3 times in your life than to win the lottery, or to all kinds of things are much more likely than that, probability-wise. So having some understanding of probability is I think, helpful as well. I think it's helpful for most people. We tend to, we have cognitive biases that are, we underestimate and overestimate probabilities of things based on informational biases, cognitive biases, right? So there's one called the availability heuristic, which says that we overestimate things that we can, the occurrence of things that we can remember more easily. So things that are dramatic, like a plane crash or a crime, some really horrible crime being reported, or something like that, those stick out to us because they're dramatic. And so people that are exposed to news about those things tend to overestimate the occurrence of that, and that's called the availability heuristic. And so to counter that, understanding a little bit about probability. So the thing with the coronavirus, that's going on right now. This is a real tangent. I'm sorry, but the thing with this that's going on right now is there are a lot of people in the United States, for whatever reason, who are resisting getting vaccinated and resisting getting, doing things that they should be doing, like wearing masks and that sort of thing. And they will frequently throw numbers around, but not really understand what they're talking about. And they'll say, well, if you are vaccinated or unvaccinated, you have just as much chance of passing the virus on to others. So, the virus, the vaccine is useless. And that's not true. I mean, it's 100% not true. Vaccinated people get the virus at a rate that is 4 times less than people who are unvaccinated. And so if you are vaccinated, you are 4 times less likely to become infected. And so you are 4 times less likely to be able to pass the virus on to anybody else. That being said, they are saying with the new variants that, the viral load for somebody who's vaccinated or unvaccinated is very similar during a certain phase. And so it is, when somebody has an infection, there isn't much difference. However, you're just less likely to get infected and be able to pass the virus on. So, whatever your feelings about vaccination are, that position is just not true. It's a false position based on a real misunderstanding of probability. Very basic probability, not even really complex probability. Right. So, if you're 4 times more likely to get a contagious disease that you can pass on to others, you are 4 times more likely to be able to pass that on. Very simple. Very simple. And then people who are vaccinated are they tend to have fewer symptoms and don't aren't sick for as long. So they may be, but we don't know yet, contagious for a shorter period of time, and the viral load may reduce. There's some statistics. So, but these people are going to latch on to ideas that support their firmly held beliefs, which is another cognitive bias. So it's called confirmation bias, when we place more weight on evidence that supports our firmly held beliefs. And that is true for everyone, myself included. I'm not, saying that I don't have biases. We all have biases. But that's just what's going on. That's what's going on here. I do try to look at data and try to allow information to change my mind about things. It certainly has in shamanism, where I was like, I'm not going to do divination, and I'm not going to be good at it. And then when I got into it, it turned out to be something that I was good at, and something that I wind up doing quite a lot of. So taking in new information and changing your beliefs and opinions about things based on new or better information, that is a way to grow in this world. That is a way to understand things better. And honestly, just live a better life. to not just deny everything that, comes across that isn't what you already believe. Take everything for checking, which is a statement that Lester Levinson, a spiritual teacher I really like, used to say. Take it for checking, meaning, even when I, tell clients something that I see in Journey, or, somebody reads your cards and gives you some information, you really don't want to just place full weight on it. You always want to check on that and see how it plays out for you. Right. Like the person with the red farmhouse in my Journey. At first she was like, yeah, that doesn't make any sense because I live in the city and XYZ. And, it did eventually turn out to be a thing, and she had to email me about it, which I was grateful for. I was happy for that because, when I can get a confirmation about something, it makes me feel good for one thing. So there's that part of it, but, it's also helpful for me to understand going forward, like, okay, this is a probable future and you might not see how you're going to get there. But something like this is very likely to show up on your path. And that is precisely what happened. So there was a probability that she was moving out of the city, even if she hadn't accepted it. And there was a, probability based on this house becoming available. I don't know how many houses outside the city or in that area were going to be up for rent. And it happened to have a red farmhouse outside of it, which is what I saw. That was these probabilities kind of lined up. And so it was a bit predictive. But can you predict the weather? Or, maybe without equipment, and there are people who are better at this, way better at this than I am. I have had some unbelievable readings before where people got, descriptions of people in my life and, like what their, could even tell what their power animals were and all kinds of stuff, all kinds of really cool information that could not have been, the probability of guessing all of the information would have been very, very slim. So, I've had some very uncannily accurate divination readings on my behalf with people who do that sometimes for a living. And, it's always pretty cool when that happens. I'm not a person who goes to get my tarot cards read a whole lot or, get psychic readings a whole lot or that sort of thing. There are people in my life who will read my cards once in a while, like as a favor, or for fun or to, see what's going on. But, and I do my own divination work very frequently. But when it's on, it's kind of cool. Like it feels cool when it's on, and you get some really good information about that. And I've been given some warnings about some people doing some nefarious things in my direction, and that's helpful as well. So I can prevent some problems, which I've done, and worked out really well. I'll wrap up with one thing. So, if you are into divination in any way, if you're into readings or scrying or doing cards or, what have you, there's a little piece of ethical advice I want to offer because I like these. I always like to have at least one thing that is sort of useful. In my world, in the shamanic world, we people who are behaving ethically do not do work on behalf of people without their permission. So I would not do divinatory work for somebody without them knowing. So I am not going to, read a friend's cards to see what's up for them if they weren't knowledgeable about it and gave me their explicit permission. There's some things that can happen where, I've done readings for people and I say, I see something happening. I see something happening for your son. And this is coming up and this is a problem that you need to be aware of, but I'm not actually doing the work on the behalf of the son who's not in the room. I'm doing the work on behalf of this person. And it's a fine line. But I'll tell you that I was at a class. I was at a drum making class. I was making my own drum. I have a lot of drums. But I was making my own shamanic drum with a Native American spiritual craftsperson who took us through this whole spiritual process of building a hoop drum, and it was a very cool event and whatever. And on one of the breaks, I was talking to a woman, just chatting with her, and she's like, she was a professional psychic. She did readings for a living. And all of a sudden, she started diving into personal stuff about me. She was going into some stuff from my past, some traumatic stuff, as a matter of fact. She's like, well, I do psychic readings for a living, and I can see that this happened to you when you were this age and this. And she was right, but what a violation. For one thing, she could have risked re-traumatizing me, but for the other thing, I didn't give her permission to do that. And it's sort of like rifling through someone's underwear drawer. That's what it felt like. So, ethically, don't mess around in other people's business. You frequently, if you do divinatory work, you'll get information about other people that are associated with the work that you're doing. So if I'm writing a book right now, and I did a reading, a card reading of some information about publishing and that sort of thing, and some information came up about an older woman who's a personal friend and in business and and I was like, okay. So there was some information about somebody who I think is going to wind up helping me with this book. And so, but I wasn't doing the reading on them or about them. So it was information that came through in relationship to myself. So don't go rifling around in people's underwear drawers. That's my one piece of advice. Figuratively or literally. You don't belong there, and it can be very violating. And in the shamanic world, your ethical violations, your helping spirits may decide to stop working with you or to leave you for a while, leaving you in the dust. And they'll usually give you some kind of warning, like you got to stop this, or I'm not going to give you this information anymore. And so. It's important from that perspective as well that, but just from a straight up ethical perspective. So I would encourage you, I think, there's so many different ways to do divination. And, if you want to, I love doing pendulum work for yes and no answers. And I have located items that I have lost with pendulum. Obviously I do a lot of divination work in Journey. Because I'm, a shamanic practitioner, and that's my forte. But I like cartomancy as well. I've done some things where I have a divination bundle where I drop the items onto a cloth, and then I go into Journey and read them while I'm in Journey. But there's all kinds of ways you can do divination. You can explore it if it's something you're interested in doing. You can, everything from palm reading to iris reading to, but really, you got to focus on developing, if you want to be good at Divination, you have to focus on developing your intuitive skills, because that's where the rubber hits the road. It's not just about pulling the right card out. It's about how do you relate that card to the person or to the information or to the question. And that's where your intuition comes in. And that's really, really the key to the whole thing. The tools are the tools. There's no magic. There's magic in everything, but there's no special magic in a deck of cards, right? That is mass produced and, comes here. Yes. As you use your cards, you will imbue if you're reading tarot cards or whatever, you will imbue them with much more of your spiritual energy. And over time, they will become more useful tools to you. They will be more in sync with you. They will vibrate at a in a way that is more akin to your energy. Which is why you don't really want other people reading your cards, because it screws the energy up. And I know people who, smudge their cards or clear their cards. I don't do that a whole lot, but I also don't let people handle my cards a whole lot. Most of my cards, I'm the only person who handles them. If I'm doing a reading for a person with cards, which isn't very often, I will have them split the deck. So it's like one touch, and that's it. But I don't let people shuffle. I don't let them look through my decks. I don't let them, do readings with my decks. I don't lend my decks out, with very rare exceptions, that sort of thing. But again, just to remember that these are tools, and the important tool is your mind and your intuition. It's your intuition feeding information into your consciousness that you can read and determine and get information from, whatever method of divination you're using. So with that being said, I will wrap up this podcast episode. I love you all. I hope that you will, if you have not subscribed, you can subscribe to this podcast and anywhere you're listening to it. And come to my website and send me a message if you have topics that you're interested in or questions that you would like covered in future episodes. I love to hear from people. And with that, I hope you stay safe and sane and healthy, and I love you all.
You have been listening to Speaking Spirit with your host, John Moore. For more info or to contact John, go to mainshaman.com. That's maineshaman.com.